Thank you.
Can I just also offer my welcome to everybody in the room? It's just a genuine pleasure to be here this afternoon, and the sun is shining on us, so it's obviously just going to be fabulous for the rest of the day. And I think it's an important event, actually, for us. It is our first LGBTQ event in Brighton, and I hope the first of many. And what I'm just going to do is just a little bit about why that's important, a little bit about facts and figures, because I think actually data tells a story about where you start from and also where you hope to be. And also just talk about really the day and how we can get the most out of today with the kind of I suppose, little wisdom words is what you put in, what you put down, you pick up. So we'll talk about how we do that in an effective way later on. What I do want to start off with, though, is the context, setting this in the context of us, as many of us who are employees of the BSUH Trust. Also, of course, some of you in the audience who support the BSUH Trust in maybe an indirect way. And we also have some partners, Stonewall obviously here today, as we do have some other trust partners who've come to see how we're setting up and how we're approaching our approach to diversity and inclusion. But it is important to set the scene, and I suppose you have to go back to simple human values and principles. When our 8,500 staff come to work in BSUH, I think you come, you know that you have been trained or you will be trained, and you come to do a job of work, which is fine. But there are things that as people we need from those jobs of work. We need to feel valued in those roles, whatever they are. We need to find them fulfilling. We need to and require, and it is very reasonable to expect us to be treated with respect when we're at work. It's also actually important that we find our roles nourishing and that we're valued for not just what we do, but who we are. These are basic human requirements that are really important to me, and I suspect important to every single person in this room. And it is within that context that we have set up our whole approach to inclusion. And today is the second of a major event. It's our first in terms of addressing issues for our LGBTQ staff and others who actually want to be involved in improvements in areas around that. But we also started last year with a similar event around our RES program, so improving our race equality program. And I would say then, and I did say then, as I say now, this is all about inclusion. It is all about those simple principles of valuing. But it is important sometimes when we are different or have different approaches to our lives that we can appreciate the differences that we have and celebrate them as much today. So I think that is what is important. And if you look up here, you'll see our ambition is indeed to really, really build an open and inclusive place to work. And of course, we all know that that's the key to delivering outstanding care. And just as Alan said, it's not just our workforce is diverse and has different needs and wants. Everyone wants to be valued. We also have a very diverse community that we serve. And again, we need to absolutely walk in their shoes when they come into our roles, our hospitals, and actually get treatment and the support they need from us too. So it's a really important agenda for us. You'll have heard also from Alan today that we have Stonewall here as a guest, so thank you very much, Stonewall, for being a partner in helping us with this, and we'll hear more about that from Pete later on. And as also I've mentioned that we have other people in the room, again, who can contribute to our journey of improvement and really achieving the ambition we've set out clearly here. Now, a little bit of context, because that's always important too, just in terms of the organisation. And I think you'll know that there's been a few challenges within the BSUH hospital for a few years. It's been, I think, incredibly tough on staff, actually, and I think that's as a result of, being somehow put into special measures. And I have to say, the very negative, sometimes media attention that surrounds that. And also, I have to say, the undue attention that we don't want, sometimes from our regulators around this. So I think it's been 5 tough years, Also, that toughness has been increased by the fact that I think I am the 5th chief exec, and of course our team will be the 5th team that's been in the organisation in the last 5 years. And what that means is lack of consistency of leadership, often around decision making, and having no clear pathway about how we drive things through. So it has been really tricky, I have to say. Again, just to remind people, I'm sure everyone in the room knows, but 22 months ago, nearly 23 months ago now, we were asked in terms of our previous roles in Weston, just the neighbours across the way, to come in and to support BSUH in terms of leading and managing the organisation. And I think the reason for that was about providing stability. And the fact that we had been, and this is my 11th year in Weston, it's now my 2nd year and coming to the end of my 2nd year in BSUH, which I'm very proud of. But I think it was just about adding some stability. What was very clear to us when we came in prior to starting on the 1st of April was that there were absolutely amazing staff in BSUH. And I think the trick for us was coming here and being able to showcase that absolute brilliance that we have within the organisation, and I'll come back to that. NHSI might say to me in a meeting, yes, yeah, we like the brilliance, but we want you to do certain things. And they came up with 5 things that they wanted us to do, which are up there. They wanted us to exit financial special measures. They wanted us to exit quality special measures. They wanted us to improve culture. Come back to that in a moment. Also wanted, while we're at it, to improve A&E. And if that wasn't enough for the next 3 years, it was to, and also, can you build the hospital on time and on budget in a very constrained site? So we thought, no problem, we'll do it. We'll go and just see what we can do. And on a very serious note, we gave it actually quite a lot of consideration. And the very important point for us was genuinely, even sitting in Weston, which was in a little bit of a different position, was actually our patients went to Brighton for their cancer services. Our patients in West Sussex go to Brighton for their tertiary services. It is in all our interests that those services are outstanding and the care is outstanding. And actually, as a resident in West Sussex and as somebody who lives there, my family live here, it's important to me that we have that sustainability moving forward. And I know to all my colleagues as well. Also, when I go back to culture, and you'll see the statement there, which was in the CQC 2016 report, there was I think, like a PhD written on culture within BSUH at the time, and none of it was very pleasant to read at the time. And part of that was around a culture of bullying, harassment, major issues around race inequality, but also, actually, if you looked at other protected characteristics, there no attention, it felt, being given to those because of the other issues in the organisation. And that is not an inclusive approach to moving forward. So we recognise the context there. And again, really, just going back to having an ambition and why that matters, and again, really characterising, there is a really great research evidence base that tells you why having a happy and included, empowered and valued workforce actually translates into excellent and outstanding care. It just does. And if people feel valued and nourished, you will get that discretionary effort without whinge, without call, without anything, because people can trust in the values of the organisation and move it forward. And that is absolutely essential when we're creating the right culture in the organisation. Culture isn't simple, though. If you really look at an organisation like BSUH, which has 2 hospitals and many sites, cultures are born of teams within the organisation, and you'll have some healthy teams, and sometimes, unfortunately, you may have some unhealthy teams. So setting a culture is fine, but you have to embed it through the organisation. You have to support, make sure leadership training is given about the importance of some of these issues, and you have to follow it through. And that is our commitment to you today about doing that. There's also, of course, strong evidence about staff engagement, and again, the positive correlation with that and positive patient outcomes. And again, it's just a fact that happens, and I'm not surprised around that. And I think the inclusive agenda is particularly important to hear when we do have such a diverse population coming through our doors. And we need to be enabled to treat all of those with respect and to be able to walk in people's shoes or understand their shoes that they walk in. It's really, really important. And I think it's also important as a major employer of people that we also model the behaviours that we wish to see in the rest of Brighton and Hove, not just through other public sector organisations, but just in the way that we conduct ourselves and conduct our relationship with people. It's really, really important. So they're the reasons why it's important. The how do you make it real is the next question. And again, I think there are two particular points I want to draw out here. One is listening, but it's listening so that you are informed. It's not listening in a, yeah, I'm listening kind of way. It's thoughtfully and reflectively listening about what people are telling you. That's really, really important. And today is, in part, quite a significant listening event. It's also, by the way, going to be full of fun, music that I've never heard of, possibly. And we're going to have games as well, which everybody likes, which is great. But on a serious note, it's a listening first and foremost event as well. So just remember that. What I also do want to share with you, though, is our genuine philosophy and approach to how we create culture, not just in BSUH, but something we've learned through the last 11 years about what works and what doesn't work. And what we have always used, and have used in Brighton since day one, is something called our patient-first approach. And that is our philosophy and our leadership framework for how we both lead and manage the organisation. And when we talk about putting patients at the centre of everything we do, we actually mean that. And if you do that, part of the things that support that is making sure your staff are well equipped in every way possible to enable that to happen too. And we take our patient-first approach really seriously and have never deviated from it. And I believe it is the thing that has made some substantial change. We have lots more to do in the organisation, and I absolutely recognise that. But I'll share with you some of the successes in a moment. So what is patient-first? Some of you will be much more au fait with that in the audience, particularly if you've worked in some of our frontline services on wards, because we've been rolling out our patient-first improvement system. Some of you will have attended some induction classes to know what it's a little bit about, but probably most of you will have heard of it somewhere or the other through our communications. But what it's about is getting a fundamental transformation in our culture and a relentless focus on doing what is right for both our patients and indeed our staff. And it's about creating something that enables that to happen, not just have really nice, happy words, I have to say. And the biggest thing that we've recognised is that if you're talking about improvement and really driving a philosophy of improvement, which is what we're talking about under Patient First, is how every day all of us can come to work and just change a little thing in the way that we approach our care for patients, and that will end up accumulating so significantly and really, really improving the quality of care that we give. But what we recognise is that it's only through our staff that we achieve that. As an exec team, we achieve nothing. We can only provide the framework. It is our 8,500 staff out there every day that can do that. So we really do see it as very important. You'll see here we've got sort of four underpinning principles. One is to standardise, and what we mean about that is find out what works, but find out what works from staff. But sometimes there is a best way of doing things, and we shouldn't be apologetic about that, but we involve people in how we co-create some of those things. Improve, we change little and often. Most of improvement, 80% of improvement, is based on little things every day. It's not the big transformation programs, it's little things every day. And it really does work. And I hope that people in the room, when you go out to have a look around the areas outside in terms of our showcasing, we'll talk to our Patient First team about the genuine effects and benefits that have had on our staff in this organisation and how it's made them feel so much more empowered about changes and the way that they feel about coming to work. Redesigning is, of course, you learn from standards, you learn you always want to improve, and there is always room for improvement. That needs to be the philosophy. We need to be humble around some of this. And of course, empowerment is about not only respecting what frontline staff do, but giving them the tools to do the job in the most effective way possible. And some of you, again, will have been through our 4 or 5 month training course for our Patient First Improvement System, where we are putting in resource and energy and effort, and I hope in a respectful and empowering way that gives the tools to our organisation. We're only at the start of our journey for Patient First, but I have every optimism and genuinely just significant belief that this can be the way and the tool that helps us showcase just the brilliance that is, I know, absolutely innate in our organisation. I mentioned that we've seen some green shoots, and I have to say, I think if you go back to the 5 things that were asked of us coming in, one was to exit financial special measures, tick. We did it. That doesn't mean that we're still haven't got a little challenge in finance, but it's not as big as the challenge that we came into. And we have a plan for how we will improve that even further. But the most significant thing that I'm proud of, genuinely, actually, because it involved every person in this room, was the outcome from our CQC inspection at the end of last year. And it's really fascinating, and I probably should have brought it, about where we've gone from. But we have gone from an inadequate rating to a good overall, and I'm so proud about what I'm about to say, and an outstanding for care. And I think you should clap yourself. And it's not just about what we achieved. Again, it was how we achieved it. So these are the words that the CQC, when we did the Wordle on our CQC report, the most used words. I'd never heard of a Wordle to the last CQC, but anyway, I'm learning things all the time too. But it's the most used phrase in the report, and you'll see it's good, it's improvement, it's patient first, it's fantastic, I have to say. But the bit that I'm most proud of, genuinely, is this bit. And this is what staff told the CQC. And it is a complete difference from the phrasing I showed you earlier on from the 2016. And what they said to us genuinely is there has been a paradigm shift in culture and positivity, and that everyone they spoke to, and they won't have spoken to everyone, and I'm sure there'll be people in the room, if I'd spoken to them, I wouldn't have said some of this, and I'm sure that's true. But the people they did speak to were really positive about the way the organisation was moving on, the way that problems were being addressed. Not that we've arrived everywhere, because we know we haven't, but that they felt engaged and were part of the improvement and felt they knew what was happening within the organisation. You'll have seen earlier that particularly around the LGBTQ plus agenda earlier that I showed you, people felt that nobody was interested in them in 2016. And what you see here is a shift in that. And as I say, it's not to say that we haven't got lots to do, but there's a significant shift. And I think today is an example of that, about the investment we all need to make in actually having ownership of the improvement we want to see within our inclusion agenda in the organisation. So that's really important. I'm also delighted to say, and today at 9:30 this morning, the staff survey was published. And again, if I can kind of just show you, it's really been fascinating. Over the last 2 years, you'll see the blue line there, which is we encouraged, and I have to say, we unashamedly used bribery, which was, by the way, cake, to get people to fill in their staff survey. It worked a treat. So we learned from that year 1, and we even did better in year 2, and the cake was even better, I think. There was certainly more of it. And we got a really huge feedback into the survey, which is absolutely essential when we're trying to listen to staff to see what their concerns are moving forward. So I'm really proud of that. And if you compare our 59% this year to the national average, which was 44%, that shows you it is fantastic. So I thank you all. And please continue doing the surveys. They do mean a lot to us. And sometimes we don't like we'd prefer not to hear what's in there, but we know it's important to hear it so that we can do something about it. So thank you so much for doing that. Really appreciate it, which is really important. And it's been really interesting, actually, if you look at this pie chart here, that in the kind of 90-odd questions, 62 of those have done better. 21 look as though they've done the same, but actually they've changed some of the questions. And there were a few that we didn't do as well as last year, but there was only 1 percentage point in it, which I was pleased to see. But overall, absolutely fantastic, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. So that's really good. But what did it say? What did the survey say? Well, if I can tell you that 2 years ago, our staff survey was the second worst in the country, and I mean in the country, so that's not a great position to start off in. It slightly improved last year. It has made a significant jump this year. And if you look at the themes, and again, you can get all of this on the internet, we just posted it literally today, you'll see that we're approaching the average now for certainly equality and diversity and inclusion scores. So we're just a teeny bit off the average, but we still have a way to go. And actually, again, we are moving up in terms of the others to be thereabouts or just slightly below, but we know exactly where we need to put some effort in to make that even better. If I show you the next slide, because it's even more graphical, if you have a look at this, you've got the 2017, which by the way was better than the 2016, so you need to just note that as well. And you look at the 2018 scores, and you look at the percentage, the literal percentage increase, but the percentage improvement on the last green column, you'll see that in some areas we made 28% improvement. I mean, significant improvement in probably across all of the major domains there. And you've also got the average against the national average there. Again, we're not deluding ourselves, so it's great to see the improvement, but we still have a way to go. But in 4 of those domains, we're actually at the national average. In the others, we still have a little bit to go, and we will work on through that. But I can't tell you what an improvement this is to just be around the average, just a tiny bit below, then second from the bottom. It's fantastic. It's just absolutely fantastic. The theme of today, obviously, is important. And again, if we kind of cut this staff survey and look at other survey and look at our sexual orientation data, the picture is a bit more mixed, actually. So we have a significantly higher proportion of staff who completed the survey, which was great, which is LGBT and others. And that's 8.9% versus 2.8% national. That's great. So people are actually giving their views, which I think is incredibly important. But the fact is that those LGBTQ staff are reporting a poorer employment experience than their straight colleagues. So that isn't so good. And we do have to address that moving forward. Now, this reflects the findings of we had a specific staff survey done this year, and that does reflect the findings of our own 2018 survey at the time as well. And I have to say, it is reflective nationally of what's going on. You'll probably hear a little bit more of that later on as well as we go through that. So it's great that we've made a good start, but there still is a lot to do in terms of moving this agenda forward. Nationally, if you're benchmarking, you do need to look around, and I think that is important. And of course, there have been national surveys that have happened. And again, it's really interesting. And when you come to our own results in a moment, you'll see some correlation. But 70% of LGBT staff say that they still feel they have to filter or not be quite open about their sexuality in their place of work. Which I think is a very high percentage, to be perfectly honest. Now, the reason you have to ask is why do they feel that? Because for me, is that a feeling of safety, that they don't feel safe to do that? So there's some questions that we might want to explore today around that. And certainly, under a quarter, but a high still percentage, 23%, experienced a negative or mixed reactions from others in the workplace due to being LGBT or being thought to be LGBT. So again, that's not great that nearly a quarter of our staff can feel that as they come to work. And if you go back to our values again, about how important not just doing your task is, but how you feel in your workplace, it's not acceptable, I have to say, and that's a clear thing. It is not acceptable that a quarter of our staff feel that. If you look at Stonewall, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to wait for Pete to do that later, I think you'll find out, you'll have some similar messages coming through from that as well. And I'll just leave that to speak in a moment. So some of the issues, so that sometimes it's the content of what you get in surveys, the narratives that people give you, which are really just as important as the facts sometimes. And what we did see, which is great, is that in terms of our 2018-19 LGBTQ plus survey, we saw people, as I mentioned before, increasing the number of responses, which is great. And actually we estimate, but it's difficult to do that, if I'm being really honest, because people need to declare this. But we estimate about 30% of all BS LGBTQ staff actually did that. There are many positives. So what was good, and I think that's good, although I still think it could be better, that 75% respondents felt their manager did try and create an environment where they could thrive, be valued, be nourished, expect the things that all of us expect at work, and that's really, really important. But the converse of that is 25% didn't, which isn't great, as I mentioned earlier on. And what is a bit hard to hear, so we have to hear it and come up with what we do about it by the end of today, is that 73% of our community say they have, 73% of our community say they have not experienced less favourable treatment. Double negatives floor me. I think what I'm interested is there's still people who do, and that's really what I'm trying to say, much more importantly. Now, we heard earlier on that nationally it's 70% of people nationally appear to apply a filter or don't feel safe in declaring what their sexuality is. It's 80% actually in Brighton. And again, I think we just need to look at the differences and say why. And why is that a little bit worse than even the national survey says? So again, very much an issue. And 25%, and it was 23% in the national, that said they'd experienced less favourable treatment. So again, we need to look at that. It's also something, we talk about culture, and I always find it culture when people say change culture, because I don't often think they know what it means, if I'm being really honest. And it's such a complex thing, but you have to have behaviours that have to be congruent with what you say the organisation is doing. And that congruence is the most important thing. It's the most important thing that will get actually people feeling safe and believing you. You can say anything you like, you can have millions of programs, but if that inconsistency of behaviour and approach is there, it is so destructive. What I have to say I was shocked at, particularly when Nick did a presentation to our tech, and we got some of the soft statements being back, and actually these are not the worst ones that we've put on here, I have to say. It's kind of, you get the attitude, which is slightly passive-aggressive, which is stop making a big thing of this group. Why do we have to go on about sexuality and sexual orientation? It's just not a big issue. And again, I think there's a little bit of complacency, to say the least there, because you're not putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Their world is not your world. What's important to them, or the slight that they may have felt is not your slight. You'll have other slights, but that isn't the one that you felt. But you have to respect the fact that people have felt that, and you need to do something about it. There's other ones, stop making a big deal, building on that. If it's normal, then just be normal. And please do not try and force your agenda on others. And again, I'm pleased that, it's a really important thing. And when we talk about LGBTQ plus staff, we need to talk about our allies. We need to talk about our straight staff who support those who have a different sexual orientation. It's not just that agenda. It's your agenda, as I've talked about being inclusive and treating people with respect and being an ally to anybody who needs that support in terms of doing it. So it's not just about that, and I think that's important too. And of course, we have the usual, why are we spending money on this? I'm sure I should get a few little things today when we tweet nicely about what we've done today. But there's, it's inevitable that some people are out there. Now, I can't change everyone's opinions. I can't do that. I wish I had the power. Can't do that. But I absolutely can set expectations in the organisation and expect them to be followed. And that's the difference, that we have to have a behavioural contract in the organisation that has absolutely clear expectations about what the behaviours that we will tolerate and accept in the organisation. I can do that. There is an amazing piece of research also, by the way, that if you do things and you change behaviours by instruction, perhaps, are saying this is just not what we do here. Attitudes can change over time. So it's quite an interesting piece of research around that. But we are committing here today to genuinely put in that de minimis expectation about behaviours, about how people are treated within the organisation. So everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but your behaviours need to be in a certain way, respectful, valuing, empowering in the organisation, and we will make that clear as the day goes on. So if we want to have a vision for leadership, and leadership isn't just about the exec team, me, the exec team, Alan as chairman, we can set the tone and accept those behavioural contracts, but leadership, as I mentioned, we have teams everywhere. That leadership behaviour has to be exhibited throughout those teams. And we are also making a commitment that we will have leadership programs that support the right behaviours as we move forward. But in order to really drive it through the organisation, we need all of your commitment to it. And that also means calling it out when it doesn't happen. And that can be a bit scary, and that can be a bit threatening, and that can feel a bit exposing. But what you permit, you promote. So the passive comment that isn't against you, but is over there, if you ignore it, you are permitting it, and that is just absolutely not acceptable in moving forward. We mentioned about listening and about hearing feedback, and I really do want to encourage you to feedback and engage today genuinely, and be reflective, don't be shy. We do genuinely want to get the intelligence from you, so that can help us shape the behavioural contracts that we need, or the supports that we need to give in terms of whether that's education or other within the organisation. It really matters to us what you say, actually. We are all ambitious for change. When the NHSI kind of think, yeah, we want you to change culture, and they might be happy with the CQC outcome, I'm not happy because we've seen from our staff survey, there is still a way to go in terms of how we behave with each other in the organisation and make it truly inclusive. So there is a lot of work to be done today, and I think that's really, really important. So what about next steps then? Well, you'll hear about this, but you have, I have to say, we'll work through today with you, and there'll be many opportunities for you to work. We are working with Stonewall to help us to at least develop a baseline of how we can measure our improvement moving forward beyond just the annual staff survey. And I think that's quite important that we do that. So that's really great. We will, of course, use data, as I've said, which is really important too, the staff survey, LGBTQ surveys when they're done, and engage in all of that so that we can, again, take the barometer of where our staff feel they are, which is important. We are committing to putting resources into this work, and you'll note that our BSUH Kaizen team, we've got partner organisations like Stonewall and others, we've got volunteers, we've got students, we've got allies here today to help us to work that through and be the champions for taking the work forward, and we again will commit to that today. Today, again, the outcome of today has to be that we can collect a set of priority actions from you. And I think that's really, really important in terms of co-designing what the plan should be moving forward, and for Nick and others to pick that up. That can make it really real for us moving forward. And as I say, it requires all of us, from myself down to every single one of you within the organisation, to commit to help to improve this in a constructive way. And I hope that will end up in us being an inclusion employer of choice. And you know what? That's really important in our community too. And many of us in the room will know, we're fighting in a very competitive field for our staff, whichever area you're working in. If we can have this and be known to be a great employer, wherever you are, whatever your preferences are in life, I think that's really important. So we want you to reflect. You will have what can I do cards in your pack. And this is about your reflection, your personal commitment to this cause of inclusion and equality moving forward. And I genuinely, as you go through the day, sometimes things resonate with you and you think, yeah, perhaps I don't do that, or I could do that more. Just write it down, just capture it. You're not going to be marked on it. There's no right or wrong. It's just how you feel and what you're prepared to commit to moving forward. So I suppose today, to some effect, is a call to action. It's recognising where we're starting from, I think appreciating, celebrating some of our green shoots, and I don't want to underplay that because it's important. I'm very proud also of our network here because they've put a huge amount of work, not just into creating today, but in genuinely promoting the cause within the organisation, and I think that's really, really important. And the call to action is really part of that. And you'll see a lovely quote there about your own personal role in claiming this space moving forward. So do engage, do ask questions. We all have a role in really driving change, and it's really interesting actually because sometimes it isn't the big things, it's the little things that create the biggest changes because it's how you make people feel, which really matters in all sorts of ways actually. And we do want to be the organisation we aspire to be, and I think all of us contribute to that.